Okay, Leviticus. It's the third book of the Bible. It's written by Moses. It's 27 chapters long. And it's the place where all of our well-intentioned read through the Bible in a year plans go to die. Because we just got done with Genesis and Exodus. Congratulations on that, by the way. And they were great. It's full of colorful characters and dramatic scenes and settings. It's a giant epic. It's got blood and guts and juicy stuff on pretty much every page. It's hard not to finish Genesis and Exodus. But then you turn the page to Leviticus, and the plot slows down a lot. The tone changes dramatically. And this causes critics of Leviticus to say that it's the boringest book in the whole Bible. Or internet critics to go and look at it and say, there are laws and rules in here that don't sound like laws and rules that would make sense today. And I think that is funny. And admittedly, some of the laws and rules in Leviticus do sound like they are from another time, probably because they are from another time. There's also a lot of stuff in Leviticus that is very timeless, like the tension that drives the whole plot. The book of Exodus wraps up with God having delivered his chosen people out of slavery in Egypt. He's taken them out into this wilderness, and they're trying to decide if they're going to trust God to go and conquer this land that he's promised to them. And they don't have a land at this time. They don't have any cities. They don't have a king. But what they do have is God himself living among them. There's a physical manifestation of God living in this tent, this portable temple. They call it a tabernacle. And he's right there. I mean, that's amazing. But now here's the problem. Nobody can go anywhere near the tent because God's in there, and he's so perfect and he's so holy that he's unapproachable because the people, they're not so holy. They're not so perfect. So the tension of Leviticus is, how do imperfect people approach a perfect God? And really, it's not the tension of just Leviticus. It's the tension of the whole Bible. It's the tension of all of human history. It's the tension of your life and my life. It's the big question that everybody wrestles with ever in every culture, which is, what is the point of me? And is it possible to connect with the divine, even though the divine is obviously much, much bigger and much, much better than me? Now, I understand. Somebody could go and look at Leviticus and be like, it doesn't seem like a story. Where is this narrative? Where is this plot that you speak of, internet person? Well, it's subtle because the plot of Leviticus is mostly a conversation. There are two parties in this conversation. One is Moses and the other is God. So that's a big deal. And as a result, there's a bunch of just huge block quotes throughout the thing where God is explaining to Moses what his instructions are for the people and how they live so that they can be in fellowship with God, so that they can approach God to some degree, despite the huge difference in the goodness and holiness of God and the goodness and holiness of the people. And in this conversation, God is not shy at all about saying, you people do bad things, and there's a penalty for that. However, there's going to be the opportunity here for a certain substitute for the consequences of your wrongdoing. And so he creates a sacrificial system with seriously intense laws and details about how to do it. God expects the people to get this right. And the sacrifices aren't just for, I did a naughty thing, now I have to go sacrifice an animal. There's also sacrifices that are built for, like, if you don't even know you did a bad thing, or you meant to do a good thing and then you accidentally did a bad thing, or bad things that everybody kind of collectively did, but nobody even knows how exactly they got it wrong, just institutional failure. There's also sacrifices for just fellowship and right standing with God. He also explains that he wants the year to be sort of this holy rhythm for a connectedness with the people and God. And so at different times of the year, he establishes these different festivals that are meant to remind people every year of the things that God has done. And each of those things remind people of different aspects of the character of God and the provision of God. And again, he's got some pretty particular expectations for how those are supposed to work. He doesn't want institutional drift here where those festivals start to take on some sort of other meaning. Third, as you would expect from any law, there's a bunch of stuff about basic ethics, how you treat other people, things that are prohibited, like don't kill other people, don't take their stuff. I mentioned a minute ago that there's a lot of things in Leviticus that are still clearly applicable and relatable in modern society. Well, the rules about how you treat other people and what you do to solve a dispute, all of that kind of stuff that we think about today, and our laws look pretty similar to what we see here in that regard. What doesn't look so similar to what we see in Leviticus is this set of laws and expectations that we'll call clean and unclean regulations. Now, clean and unclean, sometimes it overlaps with moral stuff, like don't hurt other people or whatever. Sometimes it overlaps with sacrificial stuff, but it's sort of a category unto itself, almost like how today we might think of taboos. A clean and unclean thing is about a state of religious and ritual cleanliness and preparedness to go into the presence of God and do religious things that are part of the relationship with God. Now, there are things that can make a person ceremonially unclean, so they have to sit out some religious stuff for a while, that are nobody's fault. They're not bad. It's just the natural functions of the human body, things your body does that are beyond your own control. Being around the dead, which sometimes, regrettably, just has to happen in life. Again, clean and unclean aren't just about moral goodness. It's about ritual readiness. There are things that in God's system just don't mix with His holiness, including even certain types of food. Now, this might seem totally foreign to you, and you might be thinking like, oh yeah, well, this is the kind of stuff that people rightly make fun of because of how weird it is. But we have weird taboos too. There are certain things that you just do and don't do in our culture, and it's kind of arbitrary as to why. Thumbs up, that's good. Middle finger up, not so good. You pick up dog poop from the yard, okay, sometimes you got to do that. Just make sure you wash up before dinner. You want to eat veal? Fine. You want to eat a kitten? You're a monster. It's easy to get all smug and self-righteous when we look at other people's notions of clean and unclean from other cultures. But if somebody transgresses one of ours, we don't know why that's revolting and outrageous, but it just is. Well, with the Leviticus thing and the notion of clean and unclean that is explained there by God, it's more than just preferences. There's something about God's character and what God is communicating about the fallen state of humanity that is baked into all of that clean and unclean stuff. In the book of Leviticus, we also get an explanation for how the priesthood is supposed to work. A specialized group of people who study all these things, who think about it, who facilitate all of this stuff that goes on all year, all of the sacrifices and religious festivals and all of this business. And that's more or less what you get throughout the book of Leviticus. So again, it'd be easy to just thumb through it and be like, more rules, more rules, more rules. But the reality is there is a plot, and what's happening with each paragraph and each thing that God says here is we're getting a little more clarity on just how big the gap is between the imperfection of us and the perfection of God. So I get it. You're reading through the book of Leviticus. It's easy to come away saying that is so intense. And you're right. It's serious. The tone of Leviticus is not playful. It's serious as a funeral. At one point, some priests get appointed and they're kind of flippant with the rules about how to be a priest and how to do all of this stuff. And they die. So why is all this law in here? What are you supposed to get out of it when you read a book like Leviticus today? Well, one, it helps us understand the Old Testament, because these laws are going to help Israel to thrive. God is literally teaching them how to function as a society. Two, it points out human error, human sin, human need. And you might be like, well, that's not fun at all. Yeah, but it's important. Maybe somebody could think to themselves, oh, there's a gap between God and man, but I'm pretty special. I'm pretty smart. I'm pretty good. Like, I think through self-discipline and meditation, I can start to get close to God. And I could approach him on my own. But you read through the book of Leviticus and you realize you can't do all of this. No way are you going to get that right. And even if you could, because you have the best self-discipline ever, you can't keep the spirit of the law at the level of the heart. Jesus himself says as much in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. So it points out our need before God. But then the next purpose of the law speaks to that. It lays out a pathway to atonement, to forgiveness. All of this is revealing that God likes to redeem things. This isn't, one of those miserable religions that comes and goes very quickly because there's no forgiveness in it, and as soon as you get something wrong, you're just irredeemable and horrible. No. God is doing all of this because he's glorified in redeeming broken things. He's interested in forgiving sin. He's drawing close to flawed people, not washing his hands of them. So this is great news. So how ultimately does that forgiveness and that atonement happen? Well, all over the Old Testament and all over the New Testament, we realize that it happens by believing God, by trusting in God and trusting that grace and that forgiveness that he keeps holding out is real. Even in the Old Testament, a couple books earlier, Abraham, it said of him that he believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. So the fourth function of the law that comes to mind for me is that it reveals the character of God so that people can understand who this God is that they are believing in. They can get what he's into and what he's up to and where they fit into all of that. And ultimately, they can understand that it is by his power and his character and his grace that people can have right standing with God, not by diligent human effort to keep a law that the more we look at it, the more we realize is just too overwhelming for us to keep. It's too heavy a burden. Well, at the end of the book, God has laid out all of this stuff, and Moses is now able to approach him, and future generations of God's chosen people will know what they need to do in order to be ritually clean, in order to approach God. Well, it's great. But also the tension still lingers because we're not looking for a stopgap union between God and man that gets us close. The whole thing points to the need, the desire that we should have to see right relationship with God, like permanently. And that's where Jesus comes into the whole thing. Leviticus really looks forward to who Jesus is and what he says, and specifically what he does on the cross and in the resurrection. Jesus specifically says in Matthew chapter 5 that he didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. He didn't come to abolish them. He came to fulfill them. Jesus' teachings are the completion of what we see here, but also what he did as a sacrifice for the sins of humanity on the cross is a completion, a fulfillment of all of the ideas of the sacrificial system laid out here, because Jesus is the ultimate, perfect, flawless sacrifice who is able to resolve the human problem, resolve the problem of sin, defeat death, and ultimately make right standing, true, lasting right standing before God for all people possible. So if you get done with Leviticus and you're thinking to yourself, this system is overwhelming, it's exhausting, and the sacrifices don't even fix the problem of sin forever, good. Because when you get to the Jesus part, you're going to absolutely love it. When you picture Leviticus, visualize the law. When you think about the theme of Leviticus, reflect on the idea of a perfect God creating a way to draw near to imperfect people. And if you don't have time to read the whole book, make sure you check out at least Leviticus 17:11. Boom! That's Leviticus. Up next is Numbers, which gets back into a lot of that juicy blood and guts stuff, a lot of fun stories in there. Thank you so much for watching this video and hanging out with me. If you found it useful, I would welcome your subscription. If you don't think I've earned it quite yet, give me another chance on the next video. Maybe you'll think I've earned it then. Either way, thank you so much for being here. Look forward to seeing you next time around in Numbers.